Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, I want to thank Karen coming all the way from Palo Alto in the traffic, all the way to here.
I gotta
So-
tell you, it's been so long since I avoid that if I possibly can, and it's been so long
I do
since
too,
I've
I
done
avoid
it.
traffic.
I had no idea. It's much worse than the last time I did it. But
In any
anyway,
case, you're happy that she's here.
Yeah, I am happy.
I met Karen at Open Studio in May.
Yeah, uh-huh.
So I saw her nice work on display. I said, yeah, I should invite her to do a demo for us here. And she accepted. And we are happy that she's here. I think at young age she started drawing and whatever we all do as artistic children.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
So,
but at age 20, she got more serious about her art and took watercolor and went in it. And she had a breakup period that she stopped painting, but she got involved with the design, graphic design. So not completely away from art. So you have to know art in order to be in design. Yeah.
It's very close
And
to
ever since she has included the art in her life, but her bio on public bio is very limited. I let her add whatever she wants to add for us to know her better. You can take it from
Are
here.
we ready? Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, just tell us all about your
Yeah,
artistic
well,
life.
I don't want to take up a lot of time
Yeah.
talking about myself, but I also know that these bios, they of necessity need to be kind of limited. But yeah, that's pretty much what Hadi said. I did, kind of like most of us do. We start just creating art as children and it's very natural for us. We don't really even think about it. My mother was an artist, and she told me, very late in her life, but I had these little interviews with my parents before they passed, so that we could, have some background to pass along. I mean, it wasn't enough, but it was something. And one of the things she told me rang true to me too. Only I discovered it sooner than she did, but she said she was probably 10 or 11 years old before she realized that not everybody draws. She said, well, because it's such a natural thing, and we probably all can relate to that. I did find out earlier because my teachers, my first grade teacher in particular, she would pull me out of certain activities because she wanted me to draw things, like Christmas. I mean, I'm 6 years old and I'm trying to draw horses on the wall or on the blackboard, or she wants me to go and design, and she was the first one to do it, and then it's okay, does that make me special, or what if I don't get my math homework done? And so anyway, then it sort of followed me through. The one thing that I wish I had done was had a little bit more business sense, because when I got a little older, my classmates, at a certain age, young girls start to get interested in fashion and stuff like that. And so I would get asked to draw models. Say, can you draw me a bride? Or can you draw me a girl wearing this or that or the other? And so oh, sure. And of course, it didn't occur to me, say, that'll cost you $0.25. So I did them all for free. And then what am I saying? Anyway, so, but what I wanted to talk about tonight, a couple of things, is I think, I don't know if it was made clear that I'd be talking about horses, but I'm a horse lover. I came to it sort of vicariously. I didn't learn to ride till I was you know, not all that long ago, when my granddaughter was starting to learn to ride at age 5 or 6, I had to take her to her riding lessons, and I couldn't stand sitting there. I had to, so I said to the instructor, I said, do you have an age limit for riding? And she said, yes, we do. And I'm thinking, what is it? She says, are you over 6? I said, I think so. She said, well, then we can teach you to ride. So I learned to ride. And I love riding. I don't have my own horse, but my granddaughter does, so I get to hang out with her horse. And whenever I can, I like hanging out with horses, and I like to paint them. And so anyway, I wanted to talk about, before I start this demo, I just wanted to talk about horses in art just for a few minutes, because you know, once I started to realize how much, you know, I would look through my mother's art books and see horses here and there and everywhere, and that, you know, that's been going on a long time. And then, as you know, later on, I, you know, got a little bit nerdy about it, and I thought there's so much wonderful stuff about horses in art that it's you can almost make a, you know, a whole semester course in art. Horses in art. But I brought a few things just to kind of touch on some of the things that, you know, you've probably seen them all, or seen references to them anyway. But see how long the history of the horse in human society. And you start getting into that, and it's so fascinating, it's so interesting. And then, you know, I came in from, you know, seeing it in art, and goodness. Anyway, so I just brought a few kind of samplings of different things that I've seen in the way horses have been treated in artistic interpretations of various kinds. And so this is the oldest one I could find. It's the cave in Chauvet, France, which is the better known one is the Lascaux, which is in the south of, this one is closer to the south of France. Unfortunately, these days, they discovered that allowing people to come and visit the caves was actually contributing to their deterioration. So now they don't let anyone in there unless they have some compelling, you know, some scholarly purpose, or, you know, you have to have a really good reason, or they don't. But I believe it's the Chauvet has a replica you can go visit. And then, of course, the Lascaux caves are the ones that we all know. Oh, by the way, this one, probably the earliest so far discovered, 31,000 years ago. And then these are newer. These are Lascaux. They're only 17,000 years old. And these are kind of, these dates tend to shift a little bit as people make more, you know, they can pinpoint a little more accurately with the processes they have. But anyway, these are two. Of course, there's lots of other animals depicted in both of these places, but you know, I'm just showing you the horses. But one of the things that I became interested recently is the Przewalski's horse. The Przewalski's horse is, there seems to be a little bit of controversy about this now, but it has been known to be the only one that still exists. That's the sort of what's called primitive horse, the kinds of horses that were living in these areas at 31,000 years ago or 17,000 years ago. Well, the Przewalski's horse still exists, and it is the only one that's never been domesticated. It is a kind of sad story, or almost sad story to that. Unfortunately, actually, the horse was hunted out of the, or well, yeah, hunted in a way. People when they found out that they were there, people from around the world came to take them to other parts of the world to, show off in zoos or something. They didn't kill them exactly, but they did in a way because they ceased to exist in their natural habitat. But a couple from Holland became interested in trying to reintroduce them to their native Mongolia. I didn't go to Mongolia, my sister did. But she saw some Przewalski's horses in person, and she said, oh yeah, very cool. So she got me a t-shirt. Anyway, these beautiful horses, you'll notice how they are, this one has these stripes. The stripes are very typical of these sort of old, sort of so-called primitive horses. And somebody, Carol, if he was about the Icelandic horse, it's almost a throwback to that. I mean, you can sort of see the traces. I mean, the heritage is kind of goes here and there and everywhere. It's not very direct, but the genes are still there. And that painting over there with the wild, crazy hair, that's the horse I rode in Iceland. His name is Matur, which means power. And he was a tough little guy. And you can see these very sturdy little bodies, the short legs. These horses still have those characters. It's really cool. So then, of course, we have the Arabian horses, and they've been depicted. Now, if anybody wants to come up and look at these later, they're here for you to look at. I can stick them over there. But they're everywhere in the world. People have been fascinated by horses. And I love this Chinese picture that I was unable to find a source for this one. I just found it online and I loved it, but I couldn't. All it said was "Guo." Are you guys Chinese?
No.
Yeah. Do you know the term "Guo Hua"? I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but what I saw online was that these two words seem to imply traditional painting. I thought at first it was a person's name, but I don't think it is. And I was hoping maybe somebody could clarify. But anyway, this is the Chinese, and this goes back to our graphic design world, because my husband and I had a firm for 30 years, and we did lots of annual reports. And our favorite client was a high-tech company who was run by a Chinese man named Cyrus Choi. And Cyrus always wanted us to do something with kind of lots of allegories and metaphors, but a lot of them have a Chinese kind of a slant to it, because that's his culture. But this one was the one that was our favorite, because he came up with a story, a legend about a king who is needing to, he was competing against other people that wanted to usurp his position, and he came up with a clever way of designing a horse race to win. And so it's all through this annual report. And then of course then it goes on to say how that has to do with the year of that this applied to. But anyway, so we did Chinese horses. And then here's our old friend, Leonardo da Vinci. His drawing was just exquisite. And so I found he was very careful. And Michelangelo did the same thing. He studied anatomy. Michelangelo was more interested in human anatomy. He'd sneak into the the undertaker's things at night and try to draw, the bodies. And that sounded really creepy to me, but yeah, okay, if you want to do that, that's a good way to learn. But see the beautiful rendering of the muscles of the horse. These are just studies, but they're just very beautiful. And I guess I was on the right track, because when I started really getting serious about these paintings, but I really want to go back and paint horses. I have all kinds of things in my drawing book about horse anatomy. I'm not sure I did it as well as Michelangelo, but I was on the right track. I thought if I really want to understand the horse's body, I want to see what it looks like. Of course, I was using secondhand references, so I don't know how accurate that'd be. I never actually dissected a horse or anything, but I mean, I didn't go to vet school. But, anyway, we have the conversion of St. Paul, the Caravaggio, and that has a horse in it. And I thought, that's interesting. And then I went back to read that part of the Bible that tells about Paul's conversion, and it said he fell down. It doesn't say anything about a horse, but Caravaggio decided that he must have been riding a horse. And so that's why it's like that. Caravaggio was really a scoundrel, but and met a very bad end at a very young age. But boy, did he ever paint. Good Lord, he was just, I just love his stuff. And then there was a period of time in the sort of, what would you call it? In the 19th century, sort of the Romantic era, when painters like Delacroix and what's this one? Oh yeah, this is Delacroix. This is a different one. Oh, this is the guy. Yeah, it's Van Tulden, and I hadn't actually heard of him before, but I love the painting. Did you know of him?
No.
Yeah. I think he's Swiss or German. Anyway, but it was very sort of a thing in those days to paint mythological figures of stories or allegories, or like this one is Ovid, is Delacroix. This is Ovid being, he was exiled because he went against, he was kind of a rebel, and he was saying things that the Roman government didn't like a whole lot, so they, instead of executing him, they sent him away. But what I liked about this one is that this goes way back, of course. It's a 19th century painting, but it depicts an ancient story in the Roman times, and that's people in those at that time, they like to go back and paint from the Greek and the Roman history and mythology. So, and this one I liked because it sort of shows the evolution of the horse in society, in their relationship with humans, in that by now that they're well domesticated, and that they were now being used for. I think I saw somewhere that they started. They're not sure when people started riding horses, but they think it was probably around maybe 3000 BC, somewhere around there. But before that, they domesticated the horse probably 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, and it was used for, as much as I hate to think of it, it was used for food. It was also, the mare's milk was used, and of course they worked. They found out how strong and sturdy they were, and how willing horses are to be a partner to humans. And that's something that we still take advantage of as we, in our relationships with our horses. They naturally are herding animals, or herd animals, and so, but they're also prey animals, and so their herd is their protection. And there's always a leader, and there's what's called a monarch stallion, and he kind of is responsible for the herd. But then the primary mare has a very important role to play in the herd dynamic. And so the idea that they have to have protection or create their own protection, they do that by being in the herd. And another one of these paintings, this one is a Hungarian artist that has a German name, von Wagner, but he's from Hungary, and he is part of that same 19th century romantic style. And some of it, I was studying a little bit of Peter Paul Rubens, did magnificent horses, and I meant to bring one of his pieces, but to be honest, there was only a few that I would even want to have to show because he did such dramatic war paintings, and I kind of look at them and I can't even stand to look at them. I mean, they're beautifully done, but my God, they're sort of just horrendous, you know, and I said, I don't even want to look at these things. Yet you're fascinated because they're so perfect, and the drawings and the way he painted and rendered the horse. Now this guy showing a chariot race, and the sort of use of horses in war became a very important thing. Again, I hate to think of it, but you know, to be honest, that's the way you know, warfare was done. It was high-tech warfare at one time, and sort of these chariot races are kind of a offshoot, or what would you want to call it? You know, sort of something that is closely related. And this painting, and if you want to come and look at it, it's almost these horses are rushing at you, and almost like, and they're so vividly done and perfectly done, and the dynamism is just almost too much to bear. If you think, my God, the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to run over me. But you know, very, very exciting painting, and it sort of plugs into just what's wonderful about horses, that they are, you know, of course they have lots and lots of symbolism in all the way down, you know, in legend and history and all of that. You know, just the fact that their beauty, and they're kind of wild, and you know, with the mane and the tails, and they can run fast, and they're just so handsome, and it's almost like they have this sort of mystique or spiritual, you know, aspect that artists seem to. I do. You know, people that love horses understand that, and people that like to draw horses that understand that. And this artist is George Stubbs, and he made a special. He was an English artist that lived in the late 1800s, and he became very well known and quite wealthy by painting portraits of horses. And he was like Da Vinci. He realized that in order to do this well, he had to really understand the anatomy. And here's one of his little drawings of the skeletal system of the horse. And this is one of his beautiful portraits of a thoroughbred called Whistle Jacket. Funny name. And then this was another portrait. This was a little more idealized. You know, it's put into sort of a romantic kind of Renaissance sort of background. It has a little bit of that kind of feeling about it. The beautiful rendering of this horse. And you'll see a lot of, let's see, did I put the Napoleon one? I don't think so. There are lots and lots of pictures of Napoleon's horse. He had a beautiful white, well, he looks like a white horse, but you never, in the horse world, there's really no such thing as a white horse. They're gray. They'll call them gray, but they look like white horses. I mean, I don't know, I would call it a white horse. But he had a beautiful white horse. There's lots of magnificent paintings of Napoleon on his white horse, or his gray horse. Anyway, those were them. And then here we have Degas, who loved to go to the races. And I have to say there was a little bit of a mystery, and I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know if whether it really is the mystery, or is it just I haven't found what I was looking for. But I could not find any pictures done by Degas of the actual races. They were always before the races or after the races, but not, you know, see paintings. And I looked and looked and looked. I said, could that be true? I've studied Degas before, but you know, he did a lot of other things too. But in this particular case, I wanted to go see what he had in, you know, what other kinds of horse pictures he had. I found lots and lots of this sort of picture. No pictures of him running. And so I got to thinking, you know what? And I can testify to that when I show you this, that drawing the horse really accurately is not easy. And I've been drawing horses all my life, But you can just look through some of these paintings and you can see that a lot of people, a lot of painters didn't really paint it all that accurately, but capture the soul and the spirit of the horse. But to be really, really accurate, not so much. And then one of the things that happened, I don't know if you've seen this picture of the Edward Muybridge photo sequence, and that was done because one of his clients had this horse, he was a horse guy, and he was convinced that the horse didn't ever have all 4 feet off the ground at once. And I said, well, but he proved with this sequence, and it's become very iconic as far as, just on itself, but it also demonstrated, he wasn't doing it to be an artist or artistic, but it turns out this is a work of art. But when you see the actual movement, then you can sort of get a little bit closer to, drawing them correctly. But lots of times I would sit, when I was having lessons with my granddaughter, I would sit there and just watch I'd watch the horse go around the arena and do the various gaits, and the feet move. Of course, I'd seen this before, so I was familiar with that. But even at that, I spent lots of times just watching like the back feet. And I watch it go around and around, and then I would sit there and try to draw it. And then I watch the front feet, and watch it while it's trotting, and watch it while it's cantering, and watch it while it's walking. And and this draw just what's the angle of the hoof when it's doing this or that or the other. And you start to observe these kinds of things, and it really gets very interesting and really fun. And then we have our friend Picasso, who also did this scary horse. But everything in this is a study for Guernica, and of course that's probably one of the scariest paintings that anybody ever made, ever. And so everything in it is scary, including this horse. But I thought, even Picasso, he's got his strange sort of looking at it from the side, looking at it from the front, looking at it at all angles, all at the same time, which ends up as this sort of odd, very strange things. And then we have a little more contemporary horse. This is Franz Marc, beautiful little abstract kinds of horses. He was one of the Fauvists, and of course they were known for crazy colors. And he's got a whole series of these beautiful paintings of horses in all kinds of crazy colors, and it's just charming. Except for one thing, he seemed to like to draw the horses from behind. There's lots of horses' butts in his paintings. And I thought, well, maybe the horse's head is not easy to draw. And so I have to ask myself, did Degas do this kind of picture because he didn't know how to draw a horse running? And did these guys, did he do so many butts because the head and the face and the eyes are not easy to draw? I mean, who knows? They're not going to wake up and tell you. And even if they were here, they probably wouldn't admit to it. But I sort of ask myself, because I have spent so much time drawing gestures. And but that's one. So I'm going to put these over here. If anybody wants to look at them later, I marked the stuff that I did in here that has to do with horses, but there's a lot of other stuff in there too, if anybody's interested in checking that out. So, to get me to this, anyway, I thought I better, I just kind of wanted to talk, spend a little time, with some nerdy stuff, because I just find it very interesting. Anyway, so what I was going to show you tonight is, this is my cousin Janice's horse called Nikki. And Janice lives in Canada. I was just up there visiting her, and she gave me this picture. It's just a blow-up, a little teeny picture. But I made it a little bigger so you could see what the original was. And she has perch runs. The perch run is a very, very huge draft horse that comes originally from France or Belgium or, around in that area. But they're very, very elegant, beautiful horses, very sweet horses, but they're gigantic. Your horse can be 15, 16 hands high. That's a fairly, 15 is, below 15 is, you're gonna wanna call it a pony, but, anywhere from, 15, 16, even as much as 17 hands. That's like a 4-inch, a hand is 4 inches. And a tall horse might be like, 17. The perch runs could be 18, 19, sometimes even 20 hands tall. And so Nikki is gone to perch run heaven, but she had 2 other perch runs, and one looked just like Nikki. But she's a female too, she's Molly. She was just enormous. I mean, I'm standing there, and her withers are like up to here. And the horse I ride, her withers are at eye level for me. And and so one of the things I had to keep redrawing was that I'm used to drawing, thoroughbreds, quarter horses that are a little bit lighter and they don't have these big bulky bodies. And these perch runs, they're actually very nice to ride. I didn't get to ride Molly and what's her partner's name? Nellie. They are not riding horses, but they are buggy horses. They have they belong to a buggy club. And Janice showed me these wonderful pictures of these crazy adventures they have with their buggy mates. They have competitions and gatherings and parties, and and then they do it in the winter too. They do it with sleighs and runners, because it's cold up there. Anyway, I had a reason to show you this, because what I wanted to do when I wanted to paint Nikki, you can see you got the original photograph. He's coming out almost not quite straight at you, but the view of his body is facing close enough to the front. Now he's stirring up a whole lot of snow and making a lot of, you can sort of sense that he's moving very quickly and energetically. But when you see him almost straight on, you don't see the gesture quite as clearly as if he was turned sideways. And so this is a perch run. This one I just found online because I wanted to make an adjustment. I thought, well, I'd like to see him running with a little bit more of the gesture. If they're coming straight at you, everything's foreshortened. Like, we all have to deal with that when we're doing portraits or, figures. You have to, that's one of the things that's always a challenge. But I wanted to just make Nikki look like he was running as fast as I think he really was. So I wanted to change him a little bit. And so what I did is found this perch run horse looks a lot like Nikki, but now it's a straight side view. And so I thought, well, maybe I can sort of do something kind of halfway in between. And so that brings me to this. This is the finished piece, by the way, except I'm not sure it's finished, and that's why it's not in a mat. It's still stuck on the paper. I like to use these pre-cut blocks, these arches blocks, because I'm terrible at stretching paper, and so I don't like to do it, and so I avoid it, but I can. And this is 300 pound, really nice, heavy paper, because I can paint on it forever, that hardly it buckles at all. No wrinkles, no nothing. And so it's expensive, that's the bad part. But anyway, so I started by drawing. And, oops, I got them numbered, and there's a reason for all these crazy slips of paper. And I work with tracing paper. And when I get to a certain point, sometimes I end up scanning it and putting it in the computer, because then I can make things bigger or smaller. If I get a good drawing, I don't have to do it. It's like reinventing the wheel. And if I can get it into, you know, I like to use what technology we have now. In the old days, we had to keep, you know, doing things over and over. Now we can scan it and, you know, make it whatever size we want it very easily. So anyway, I started out by just doing some really quick kinds of, let's see, what kind of a gesture do I want for Nikki's picture? And I just did this little quick one. I did another one on the other side. I just did bunches and bunches of them. And and then I tried one like this, and it was running off the page, so I put another piece of paper under, you know, taped it together so I could keep going, because I kind of liked the way it was developing. And then, once I did that, then I kind of refined it and got to this point. And I started looking at it and I thought, you know what, it just looks awkward. I'd rather have him at the point where, you know, maybe the two legs are kind of in the front, not one kind of going like that. It just looked a little bit, I mean, he does that, but I thought, nah, I just didn't want to do it like that. So I just kept going. Let's see, this is number 3. So then I got to this. And then I got to you know, I like that front leg positioning a little better. And then I thought, okay, let's try the back. And the back didn't work. So I had to do, but with the tracing paper, I can keep the stuff that is working and then fix the, you know, try it again and alter it but I don't have to give up and throw it out if I'm thinking that it's on the right track. And so here's another one, a little later. It's kind of all in the same phase because I haven't yet, it's all too big for the picture right now. But I'm not worrying about that because I'm going to be able to scan it and reduce it when the time comes in. So I'm just keep working on these gestures. I'm happy with the head and neck, because one of the things about these draft horses is that that you notice right away when you see an Arabian or a thoroughbred or one of these very, very finely made horses, that their bones and they're very slim, you know, they're long-legged and they have these elegant necks and they're not too big. Well, the Percheron had a huge head and huge neck and just big bodies, and the legs are sturdy, and proportionally the legs are not as long. And I had to keep that in mind when I was drawing this, because they kept coming out like thoroughbreds, because that's what I draw all the time. So I had to keep refining it and refining it, and that's what all these things are. And I finally get to a point where I got another one here, and each one is a little bit, okay, what if I do, you know, maybe the knees come up a little higher, or and you know, when I do that, then I go back to my rich photos and say, well, what are they, when the legs are doing like that, what are the back legs doing? You just got, you know, when I was a kid, I just made it all up, and so some of them looked really strange, but it was surprising how close I was a lot of the time. So, you know, just something about it makes sense, but wasn't always perfect, though. But I wanted to make sure that the legs were working like they were supposed to. So I go back and look at that little picture, because that is holding still. You know, the horses are moving, they're moving fast, you have to really look fast. But that still picture really gives a very, very good, and I use that a lot. And so I finally get to this point. And what I did here was, this is a great little trick. If you don't know about this is a good thing. When you get a good drawing, you want to get it down on your paper. What I do is put some soft graphite on the back. You know, I use these soft, you know, soft lead pencil, or you can use also a, you know, a graphite stick works really well. But you trace over the line, and then you lay it down. That's what I'm going to. Except I'm not going to use this one, because I got this down on my paper, and I realized, no, it's not right. I'm going to keep drawing. So that's why I put this stuff on. I was all ready to draw it, and I started drawing it, and what I do is, you know, lay it down there. That's what I wanted the tape for. And then just trace over that line. but you have the graphite on the back, so it makes a little mark on your paper, and you can see where you know, it's kind of hazy, and you have to do it kind of carefully because it will make smeary stuff on, but when you get it all done, you can kind of take off some of the, you know, excess graphite, so you have enough to see. And sometimes I would actually go back and lightly do it with the sharper point on the pencil, because the other thing that happens, it's a little bit thick line, and it's not a very pretty line, but it gives you enough information. It's very easy enough to erase it and trace over with your better pencil, so that works too. Well, I finally get to the point where I'm not too unhappy with the picture, and then I scanned it, and then I printed it out with the computer. And it's pretty much, then I trace it again. Here, this was the final, and then that's the one I used. And so then I put it down here like that. And then, after a while, I was painting away, and I thought, you know what? The legs are still not, they don't look like a percheron's legs, they look like a thoroughbred's legs. And I had already painted in here a lot, and I even think I'm not quite finished with it yet, because I see here, I think he needs a little bit more muscle in here, because this is not quite enough. And that's another thing I like to do before I really say a painting is done. I stick it away for a few days, you know, 3 or 4 days, and don't look at it, because things will pop right out. I do it especially if I'm having a struggle. I think, you just can't get this right. And so I might say, okay, I'm gonna put it in the closet and go work on something else, and then come back out and bring it out again, you know, a day or two. It's so amazing how easily the solutions will come when you haven't looked at it for a while. And that's what happened with this. I just got that back out today, and I said, you know what? I think I need to just beef up his little leg, and, you know, this muscle in here, I forget what it's called. I got it in my book there. And I also had to give him a little more rump. But that one was fairly easy to do. And then I redrew the leg. I had the leg slightly off. And I'd already painted on it. But, you know, actually, people think that watercolor is difficult because you can't make mistakes. It's not, mistakes aren't as terrible as they seem. And they're not as easy to fix as when you're painting in oil or acrylic. But you can do quite a bit of correction if you need to. And so I noticed when I was working on Nikki that, you know what, his backside isn't quite right. So, but that was easy to fix. And I was also went back and did another drawing. Let's see if I did put that in here. Yeah, this was the beginning of it. Because I had the leg slightly different, and the leg was too skinny. And so then I waited and I let it dry, and I did another tracing over what it was before. And I came out with that. And I don't think I didn't actually draw. I don't remember what I did actually, but I was able either to use this as a guide, or maybe I even did draw, you know, redraw this little bit right in here with this bone here, because it came out a little better. And then I'm going to show you a few things that I'm not actually going to create a whole painting, because I did that. That's why I did this, because in such a short time, I couldn't even begin to start giving you anything useful. So I thought, okay, I'll paint the painting and then point out some things that I always run into difficulty with. And I thought, well, those are the things I can show you with that. Anyway, so I was really kind of doing a little bit of fine tuning even after I had developed the painting quite a lot of work had already been done on it. But it's better. And so then the other thing that I thought maybe I could show you, and I will in a minute, is like this dappled coat. You know, he's got, it's very interesting. It's these kinds of coats will change with the seasons and also with the horse's age. The amount of dappling and the darkness or lightness of the gray can alter quite a lot even with one horse. He's got this very nice sort of light colored mane that is also a lot of the gray horses have that. And he has quite a white tail. And then the other thing was the snow. You know, you sort of wanted to, I don't know how you might do it as an oil painter, but as a watercolor painter, you almost think about it as backwards, or hindsight too in a way, because you're taking stuff away instead of applying. You know, when you paint an oil, you apply the paint, you stick it down there, and if you want a white snow coming up, you put white paint down. Well, we don't paint with white paint in watercolor. We let the paper be the white. Oh, I've been known to cheat a little bit with a little Chinese white, but not. I don't do that unless it's really necessary, which might mean there's a little tiny white line or something. I can do that. But I went to one of my favorite artists. Is Anders John, a Swedish artist, and he painted, probably the first part of his career was all watercolor, and then later on he started to paint in oil, and he was kind of a contemporary of John Singer Sargent, and he came to the United States, and he became extremely wealthy by painting beautiful works in kind of the same vein as Sargent. Of prominent society people that could pay him big fees. And he painted 3 American presidents, and so he gained a great deal of prestige, then went back to Sweden. And I went to visit his hometown, I've been there twice now, but just this past summer I spent a couple days up there. It's a town called Mora, and Mora is their kind of primary industry. There's 2 industries. One is the Watercolor, which is a ski race that's done like in March, I believe, every year. And it retraces the first kind of king, Gustav Vasa, was the king who kind of is credited with unifying the various regions of Sweden and making it a nation. But he had all kinds of enemies, and there's some crazy story about how he escaped from his enemies that were chasing him. And he escaped on skis, and he stopped off at various, homesteads and farms, and they took him in so he could hide from these people. But this Vasalopa race retraces the legendary path that Gustav Vasa went on to get away from his, and then he was able then to, create what's they say is Sweden. Anyway, Gustav Anders Zorn was a wonderful watercolorist, and so I had the chance to see a lot of his work when I went to visit there this summer. But there was also a beautiful exhibit at, I believe it was the Legion of Honor, probably 8 to 10 years ago now. And my husband always hated going to museums with me because, Okay, and then I gotta go back there, and I gotta go back up here again, so, see how he did that. Now, it takes me forever to go see an exhibit, and that's why I usually have to go 4 or 5 times before I get it all the way, well, the ones I like, I do go back to. But what I discovered, you know, he did these beautiful, beautiful renderings of water, and the sea, and lakes, and some of the Swedish landscape is full of water, you know, so he did lots and lots of these beautiful things. And I saw, guess what I saw? Chinese white. I thought, oh, Anders Zorn does it, I guess I can do it too. So after that, I'm not too embarrassed about saying, okay, if I need to use a little paint here or paint there, it's okay. But anyway, let's getting back to the snow. You know, I'm not even gonna worry about, maybe I will, just real quick here. So I don't wanna take too much time. I'm just gonna do a very quick, just so I can show you some of these things that kind of run into challenges with. Let's see, I don't even know. Yeah, there's a little, I'm just gonna start with that, just a little bit of a, and see if I can show you how that coat, and then see if I can get some of that, I don't need this, the snow. Now, one of the things I just said was that the snow, you kind of have to paint it backwards, and what, I'm gonna lay down a little bit of, this isn't gonna be very fancy, but hopefully it'll be enough to show the technique. I'm gonna put a little bit of, now when you look at snow, it's very, we always kind of tend to think of snow as white, and it is white, but in paintings or in pictures, well, you know, just, here's the original of Nikki. But this print turned out to be a little bit warmer than the original. But you see here, it's gray. It's not white. There's white sparkles, and there's little white stripes, but it's really overall, it's kind of light gray. Now, usually when I paint white things, like white flowers, or anything that's kind of white, I tend not to use, they will look gray in photos, and maybe even in real life, they look kind of gray. But at least for me, the gray tends to make it look dull. And you see it kind of, you know, if you paint it accurately, you say, yeah, it's accurate, but you know, it's kind of dull. So I learned a long time ago that if I substitute like cobalt blue or ultramarine blue, or a little bit of one of the browns in it, it makes a much prettier shadow, or you do that instead of gray, it'll be much nicer. So anyway, I'm kind of just gonna put a little bit of this, and I'm gonna make some big swaths of what, you know, take some of the paint away, just to sort of simulate that effect of the snow. And so what I'm gonna also do here, I don't know, can you, is it showing? Okay. I'm gonna do a little bit of, now this is wet, so it's probably gonna run a little bit. But what I was using, oh, by the way, that little handout that that everybody has there on the palette list on the back, or on the second page, those are the colors that I used for this, and it's very limited. I didn't really intend it, you know, that wasn't the idea, because I don't care, and I'll use whatever I need to. It's like I've said to my students, if it works, it's not cheating. You know, you can do whatever you want, as long as it works. Anyway, I ended up with a very limited palette. You know, sometimes it's a good exercise to see what you can do with a limited palette. But it's just that this is kind of a tonal painting. You know, it's just all very kind of the same very narrow range of tonal values. And what I'm going to do here is take a little bit of ultramarine blue is here, and then I believe what most of this painting was with the sepia, this warm sepia. I have two sepias here. I have a raw sepia and a warm sepia. Not all the companies make both sepias. Most of them will just make the warm sepia, but there is something called the raw sepia, which is almost like a charcoal gray. It's really, doesn't even look sepia to me, but sometimes I like it for certain kinds of things. So but this one is more, you know, I don't want him to be too brown, but I also don't want him to be blue. So, you know, I kind of try to get, but he's a little bit warmer than the snow in the sky. Now, you know, I'm just going to paint in here, and then now to do this right, I have to come back later and you know, put the darks in. You know, like for here, you know, if I'm going to paint him the way he looks here, then I'm going to have to, but I have to do that later when the under layer is dry. That's the one thing about watercolor. I think a couple of people here paint in watercolor. So you're probably very familiar with the urge to keep painting and wrecking things because you came back and painted before it was really ready. So I usually have either very large paintings, then I can paint in different parts of the painting, or, you know, most of those over there are big enough that I didn't really have to go to Starbucks while something was drying. But, you know, these smaller ones, yeah, you kind of do. But here's, let's put his hoof, didn't mean to do that. I'm gonna put his hoof in here, because that was it. Now, I hope this is enough to make the point. Then what I do here is an almost dry brush. Start mushing it around like so. And I can blot it. And then you kind of make this go away, and then it looks like the snow is kind of coming up out of the, now I want to put a little more back in, and then maybe dash it a little more, and you know, so you're kind of adding and subtracting all the time. It's kind of like backwards, like I was saying before. It's sort of seems like you're kind of, you know, putting stuff down and taking it away, and putting it back down and taking it away, and eventually you get a texture that will look kind of like blowing snow. Now, in order to get that to happen here, that's starting to happen, but I need more of the blue to contrast it.
Did you go back and scrub the flying snow, or do you just, there we go, flying snow.
Yeah, well, yeah, I understand your question. Yeah, you do. And I might end up having to go back and forth. It's like I'm kind of developing this kind of on the fly. I probably would need to take a little more time to put the, you know, the basic background in, or the basic snow colors in, and then go back in and pull it out to make the flying snow. And I can put some more in down here under his belly, maybe in here too. And, ooh, that's too much. let's see, I didn't put the back legs in, but now I want some, that's a bit much. Let me take some of that off. Because it's just too much to start with. Maybe I'll put some ground under here too. Probably should use this one. It's faster, bigger. Now, there's lots of interesting shadow lines in here, which I'm not going to put in. Actually, I did that on the painting there. I came back in there later and put those in. I was doing all of this other stuff before. And so then, now you can also, you know, just keep kind of, and then there's, if you can see, there's places where this picture, this snow here is really pretty uniform in color, but lots of times you'll see, because it's very, very thin here, but there's back in here, it's thicker, and you can see little spots that are dark and light, because, you know, they will, it's like painting rapids in, you know, water in a stream. You want to get that white foamy look. But if you look at a photo of it, there's very little of it that's actually dead white. Most of it's varying shades of gray or blue or whatever. And so the same thing happens with flying snow. It's very noticeable if you're, I've done a lot of skiing, and so I do ski paintings, and I make lots of flying snow. And some of those can be very interesting because certain times of the day you get some really strong light from one direction, and it'll make all kinds of interesting patterns on your snow. And so, you know, if you can kind of come back in here and you know, put some, I don't see that much in the photo, but it kind of gets the point across a little bit more easy, you know, clearly when you're able to sort of give it some dimension, and, you know, light and dark, and not quite so. Now, if you wanted to do this, the flying snow, this really delicate stuff here, I have this one brush. It's kind of stiff, and I use it a lot for scrubbing out, but it also works for this kind of thing. If I want to, and I also have to work backwards again to get it, you know, starting from the top of the mass of flying snow. But I want it to be, you know, less, thinner at the top, so then you're removing less of the paint at the top, and then it comes down, and I need cleaner water now, and then it'll make that kind of smooth bit of white. Now I get a little bit of a line here. I don't want that, so I'm going to kind of brush that out. But here we're starting to develop some lights and darks into this flying snow. And of course, underneath the belly, you know, I ended up, let me see, what did I do here? Yeah, I made a lot more flying snow in my painting than that was actually in the photo. But I kind of got the feeling like if I was seeing him run from that, you know, a little bit less of a straight on angle, I would be seeing more of that kind of stuff. And even if I weren't, that's okay, I'll do it anyway. But anyway, this is kind of how, you know, it kind of work it a little by little, and it'll come. And of course, then when you're seeing the snow kind of partially obscuring the legs, okay, now I can probably put a little bit of the darker color on the legs here, just to kind of again, it will kind of let the snow cover up some of it. So it's gonna look lighter, and you know, maybe it's sort of hit and miss. So you'll get some places where it's pretty, and there again, I did the wrong way. I did it the wrong way. I want to do it backwards. And you want to also kind of break the plane so it's clear that it's not part of the leg, but it's something that's coming on top of the leg. So I don't know, you get that kind of, it's a process that I take a bit of time to do. So this is just a little, you know, it's, to take more time, it gets better. But the other thing I also wanted to do was to show this dappled coat. Do we have enough time? Oh. Well, I know we need to get this done, but I'm just going to sort of, this is not the best brush.
Did you add salt for the dappling?
I have tried that and it didn't work.
Okay.
Now I didn't have, I like to use kosher salt for that, and I did happen to not to have any handy. That might have worked a little better. But then I found out, you know, I thought, well, I think I'll do it this other way. Let's see, I didn't do a little bit of stuff for his name.
So this isn't a color of most brands, you said, Carrie?
The
What's
warm
that?
sepia,
The
is that
sepia,
the one?
these two sepia?
Yeah, this is the warm sepia. Warm
It's a
sepia,
lovely color.
and, pardon? Yeah, it's a nice color with ultramarine blue. And then actually, I should just kind of point out that the snow here, that was more of a cobalt blue. But down in here with the shadows, that was all ultramarine blue with the sepia, or maybe it might have been burnt umber. I don't remember that anymore for sure. And this for sure was burnt umber, and the fence was burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And then this was all done with, I put the little wash of the sky down first, and that was almost pure cobalt blue. Oh goodness, what happened? This thing,
This time let's do a little nuts.
yeah, I see.
Very low tech.
It was kind of loose. There we go.
Good catch.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't know it was, hadn't been tightened up. But I did this all washy, you know, when I put the sky down first, and then, well, actually, I wet this whole thing. I probably did it in stages because, you know, if you try to do it all at once, it's just going to dry before you finish. But it's very easy then just to go back and let's say I start with that. And so I've, you know, wet that. I may wet it all the way over here, but I'm probably not going to paint much more than that. And then wait till it dries, and then come back and do it again, and then move it down, move it down, move it down. And you don't really see where one patch starts and the other, one ends and the other starts. It can, you know, you can sort of work on it in stages like this if you're going to work really wet like this. And so these are all colors that were in that little list. We had some cobalt blue. No, wait a minute. The cobalt blue was the sky. I'm sorry. With the foliage, I did a little bit of that same kind of combination, but more on the blue side. You know, you can do your brown and blue together in different proportions, and you can just make this whole wonderful range of grays and bluish grays and brownish grays and light grays and dark grays. But there was also little places where I dropped in just hints of that orange color.
Acadium orange you have on here.
Yeah, but very, very slight, very, very sparing, and it was very wet, and sometimes even at that it became, and yellow ochre also I used in there, in the foliage, but sometimes it looked like it was a bit overdone. And so then I would come back and wet it again and drop in a little more of a neutral color to kind of knock it back a bit. Because this was all very kind of wintry foliage, and a lot of it was just dry leaves. And then you can also, this is a fun technique to use. It's the same idea as when you're doing that kind of, subtracting. You can make very interesting branches and trees by, pulling color out. And you can probably show a little bit of that. I was going to show the dappled bit.
Oh, you pulled them out?
Yeah,
I see.
just little spots. And then I can go back. I think that's the wrong brush. That's too, you want this little stiffer brush. I need to. And you create these little, you need to kind of do a lot of it, but I'm just going to show you a little bit now. And then maybe go back in again with the same color. I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah, it is. Kind of, some of these got a little bit too big.
How long does it take, would you say, how long did it take for you to paint that painting?
I always have that trouble figuring that out because I work on it over short periods, over several days usually. It's probably a couple of days, but exact amount of time spent.
Okay,
I don't know, 3 or 4 hours maybe,
great.
if that, I'm not sure. Every now and then I think I ought to keep track of the time, but then I get into what I'm doing, I forget to do
I hear
myself. But anyway, so ideally, this sort of thing you could do later after it's been dried a little bit. But you kind of drop in little hints of dark, because the little white spots end up getting to be too big. But that's how you kind of want to start out. And just kind of work back and forth, and eventually you get that texture that. Unfortunately, it's a lot of this has to happen after you have to let things dry, and that's not easy to do. So it's but you sort of see what I'm doing here, and.
The paper towel being a very important tool.
Oh, absolutely. You can probably use Q-tips too, but I don't use those that much because they're that fuzzy stuff. It's not very clean. But what I have done on occasion to take a damp paper towel and wrap it around the end of a Q-tip, and that can be effective. Anyway, you sort of add and subtract, add and subtract, add and subtract, and eventually you'll get this kind of texture. And maybe if I can show you this one more thing about the foliage, because it's kind of fun. Here's a cobalt blue. I'm just going to do that up here, because this is a lot of fun. Actually, I'm going to put a lot of clean water here. And then just put the cobalt blue at the top. And then drop in, start dropping in the leaves and trees. get some, just straight burnt umber and add a little bit more brown. You know, some of them are gonna wanna go up into the, you know, meet up with that sky.
Do you wet your palette first? Do you wet your palette first?
No, I do that with my water.
Okay, curious, good.
I know people have squirt things that
Systems.
You know, when I first learned to do watercolor, I had an instructor that did that. And I don't know where, somewhere along the line, I realized that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. Because you know,
You can pick
good
up
paint,
a lot more color if by
yeah.
accident.
And so I didn't do that anymore. You know what I'm gonna do is actually make a real painting out of this and send it to you guys.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So you'll see that, because it doesn't look like much right now, but that's mostly because I'm having to wait.
We're not expecting to complete a painting after this.
Does anybody
No,
else
but
have any
you're not even
questions?
seeing what it's supposed, it's not even close. Because I'm working wet. And, you know, normally, part of the process is letting things dry.
You, when you were showing all your drawings,
Pardon?
when you were showing all your drawings, you do those all in one sitting, or is that something?
Well, I don't think I did that all in one sitting. I was, coming and going, because I had a lot of other things going on,
Yeah.
you know, stuff to attend to, and, to be honest, I'm not really sure. But I was working on it for a couple, this is important, this is probably something I can say for sure, is that of the amount of time I spent with the painting, probably a good half of it, maybe even more, was with the drawing.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason for that is that, you know, as we went through all of these pictures, it's clear that a lot of the times the artist wasn't all that concerned about the gesture being correct. This one, I wanted it to be correct, because that was the whole point of the pictures, to show the horse doing what he's doing. And if I had it kind of cockeyed or wrong, that would be obvious. And again, I just found, you know, when I looked at it again today, I thought, you know, there's something about, and then I remembered that with the struggle I was having, because he's a percheron, he's got these big heavy bones. And I had to almost kind of remind myself, is that he's thick. He isn't a thoroughbred. And I've got to make his muscles big and thick, and his legs big and thick and strong, like tree trunks. They're not these, you know, you watch a racehorse, and it's almost like anytime I see a beautiful, perfectly formed thoroughbred horse, and how on earth did that horse's little spindly legs hold up that big body and run like that? And of course, to be truthful, thoroughbreds do have problems like that. And sometimes I think they're overbred for that. I mean, they're bred for speed. And of course, that comes from the Arabian, which an Arabian horse is probably the most beautiful horse I've ever seen. They're just exquisite. They're delicate and
Small head. Right?
yeah, and then they have this
Smallest
lovely head. And some of them have a little scoop in their nose that's very kind of prized in an Arabian. And most Arabians are mixed. Well, thoroughbred is partly Arabian. And that's why they're so fast. But they're just beautiful horses. But you know, this kind of a horse is beautiful. He has his own type of beauty, but it's quite different from, and it's sort of something I have to keep reminding myself of. And so that's when I kind of noticed, you know, his shoulder is really heavier than what I made it here, but I can fix that because you know, this here is all this dark part coloring anyways, which is fortunate because it's not going to take much to fix, to develop a little more muscle there. And there's this kind of a sequence of muscles. There are 2 or 3 different muscles there that kind of work together. and a very, very muscly horse that doesn't have much fat on him, you'll see these lines or these, indentations and shadows and
The ripples.
shapes. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. And so, yeah, I can just, I'm not gonna do it now because I gotta do it carefully.
Right.
But I need to give him a little more of that big shoulder because this muscle kind of comes around like that, and it's a little bit too slim. But it's one of the things I was going to emphasize is that I referred to before. I said sometimes it's not that important that the gesture be right, but sometimes it is. And I have the same thing with human figures, is that I often will talk to students about, most of people will avoid putting figures in their work because they're difficult. And so, but sometimes you want to have them. I know I have a friend in Grand Canyon that, she doesn't do watercolor anymore, which is a doggone shame. She's a wonderful watercolorist. And she had done some magnificent pieces. And every piece she did had a human figure in it. And even though there's this big nature stuff, but she always wanted to have human beings in her paintings because that's why we go to these places. It's because it's, they mean something to us. And so to have a human, some people will say, no humans at all. There's another artist called Tony Foster, who has, his own private little museum up in Palo Alto. He's very lucky to have found a rich patron, he's a very lucky guy, but he's also a wonderful painter. He never puts a human or even an animal. It's all lots of foliage, but no animals or human. That's his philosophy, and his work is tremendously inspiring, but it never has humans. But one of the things that I've done, and a long time ago, I used to spend a lot of time sitting in Starbucks, because that was before we had such good internet, so we might have to go to someplace else to get internet. So I'd sit in Starbucks, and that one has some of that kind of stuff in, but I have all these different drawing books, and I would go in there and I'd sit there for a couple of hours and draw people coming in to, fix their coffee. They're stirring their coffee, they're reading the paper. And then I started drawing groups of people, and that's a whole other ballgame, to try to get two people in the, and get the proportions right. And that is such good exercise for the mind and the, see it here, figure it out, and then get it out from here and out through your pencil and then your book. And it sounds easy, and I don't think you ever can do it enough. It's fun to do, but it's also very, very, it really taxes your powers of observation and, okay, how do I make sure that the person that's near is not out of proportion to the person that's on the other side? And, it's sometimes easier to do parents and children because it's easy to make the kids smaller. But when you have two adults, you have to be very, very observant. And I kind of use a trick of, and it's a little harder to do when you're drawing people that are, getting up, they're finishing their coffee, they'll go out. And hey, you can't go, I'm not finished drawing you yet. So you're kind of struggling with that kind of thing. But just kind of making little pinpoints at important juxtapositions or angles or shapes. Where does this person's here, and then this person's here. Where's the top of the head in relation to the two heads? Are they even? Is one down, one up? How is it? But those kinds of things give you a lot of good information and give you orientation, and it's a lot easier when you can do it like that. That's kind of off the subject, except it isn't really, because I'm doing this, what I was going to, the sort of punchline to all of that is that the least little bit of something off can look way off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the, especially if you're trying to do people walking, that's another thing that, you just watch the feet. Where are the feet? Are they, you know, is the toe up? Is the toe down? The heel up? Heel down? Is the knee bent? Or how bent is it? You know, stuff like that. And you start noticing things like that, and your drawings will get better. And you know, the tendency is to be too extreme. You know, if you know somebody walking like this, and you draw them like that. And when you really start observing, these movements are very, very subtle. And so it's really easy to get it wrong. But if you kind of think about it, if something looks wrong, try to do less of it. You know, if you say like, this looks awkward, or something looks awkward, maybe the arm is not sticking out quite so far, or the elbow's in the wrong position, or is it like this instead of next to the side? There's all kinds of little things that you can do. And you know, same thing with animals, and these, the horses, and that's why I spent so much time drawing these legs. And because I kept getting them wrong. And so, anyway, okay, now that started to get a little bit, you know, it's all nice and dry now, so I can go back in and put a little more, oops, that's really heavy, but I can sort of put in a little bit of, you know, little extra darker things to indicate branches and trunks. And they have a little, I have this really nice little pointy brush. It's got one with a black handle here, this one. And I can make very teeny little lines. See, this
Take away
is
or add?
Then I can pick it up in the middle and make another light colored trunk here. Then when that dries, I can fill it in a little bit. I could put a little bit of orange too. Ooh, that's ugly. That's gonna be too much.
I think we're gonna have to take some questions and wrap soon.
Pardon?
I think we're gonna have to take some questions and wrap up soon.
Yeah, I figured that I could do this all night.
Yeah. So,
But you see, this is the idea, you know, you can go back later and, you know, again, you sort of work dark and light, and then end up with something that looks like a natural forest. And and it works also for, you know, like a springtime, a green, you know, get your greens going. And, you know, it's, I used to say to take the kids out, you know, it, did a little bit of volunteering with my granddaughter's grade school, and did some little art training for them. And I'd take them outside and say, oh, you know, what color are the trees? And they said, green. I said, well, what color is that one? And then what color is that one? And they say, oh, that's a different color of green. I said, how many different colors of green do you see? And then they'd start looking around and they'd, you know, oh yeah, look at that one's darker. So you get them kind of observing. And the same thing with the sky. What color is the sky? Well, it's blue. Okay, you take them outside. Okay, what color is that? Ooh, it's blue. What color is that over there? The horizon. Oh, it looks kind of gray. He said, hello, it's not all the same blue. And you get them to sort of start thinking about things like that, and then sharpens their observation. Anyway, this is not gonna be, I'm not gonna be able to do quite the sort of technique that I would be able to do if I could let it dry. But it's that kind of thing. You can sort of just mix and match, and you know, the idea is getting the darks and the lights, the soft and the sharp, and then of course variations, subtle variations in color, and then it's fun. It's kind of mess around with it. It's you don't you sort of like, I think anybody that works in watercolor understands that there's only so much control that you have, you know, because other paints, you know, it stays where you put it. Watercolor doesn't, it moves around. And so sometimes if you kind of know, if you've done it a lot, you've kind of seen what it does. And then you can use that information, you know, for, you know, to get the effects that you want. So this isn't anything greatly beautiful, but, you know, I hope it's given you some ideas of, and just understand that it's more important to kind of let things dry. And that's another thing about watercolor, is there are certain things you do at certain stages, and that just takes experience. There's no way that you can really read a book and find out how to do that. Yeah, you can read what, yeah, you gotta do this and you gotta do that, but how does it work in real life? The only way to do is just do it and see what happens. And then if something doesn't work, well, try it again, do something else. And eventually you end up lots of, you know, learning a whole lot just by observation and messing around. And so.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything that I think people have been asking as we've been going along?
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh, one question. So since you do your drawing separately and then you trace it with a watercolor paper, how do you make sure it's the size you want?
Oh, that's one thing. That's a good question, because I didn't touch on this, but this thing is full of thumbnails. See if I can find any. Oh, here's one. No, that's a motorcycle. I was going to do this painting. I still want to do it. In Hawaii, I was there many times, but there was this one wonderful scene that I just happened to catch of a motorcycle rider riding along through this purple jacaranda. You know what jacaranda looks
Yeah,
like?
yeah.
It was, the motorcycle was red. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to paint that. I still haven't painted it. But see, this is the sort of thing. Oh, this is another horse one. This is a ranch in Hawaii. That's another painting I want to do. But I do these thumbnails to kind of get an idea of a composition.
And size.
Yeah, and so then I can sort of, you know, use that to figure out what size things ought to be. And in this instance, I knew my horse was going to be too big, the ones that I was drawing. So I scanned it and put it in the computer and then printed it out at a size I thought I was going to need to, and I believe I got pretty close, so I didn't worry about it. But sometimes I have to do that a couple of times before I get it right. But I start with these little thumbnails. There might be some better ones than this. Oh, that was just some sketches. I thought that was a. Oh, well, here's one. This is just, I must have just had the only pen I had, the only writing or instrument I had was a red pen. But this is a bunch of umbrellas. There's this place up in the mountains where I live part-time. It's kind of an interesting, beautiful place called Indigene. They make apple ciders, and they have events there a lot. And they have all these beautiful, colorful umbrellas in the summertime. And I wanted to just kind of figure out a scene with the umbrellas and the main building in there. So a lot of them, you can do it really quick. That's what I like about thumbnail. And that I learned just from being a designer for so long, because that's, you sit there in front of a client and, you know, you're working upside down because the person's sitting opposite you, so you learn to do these things upside down. I learned that from my husband.
But now, with most art, the composition is a huge part of the actual piece. And I think a lot of people forget that, and they think, oh, great, let's paint, you know?
And so you don't have a plan to start with? Yeah, well, I think that can be a mistake. But yeah, that's really helpful. I was trying to find something here that also had another thing that's really important to do, or good to do, is the value studies. Once you've done a thumbnail, do a value study too. And that will, oh yeah, here's one that I did of, this is a value study here. This is just a country, this is our road, and right after a snowstorm, and so I was kind of wanting to paint that.
Can you slide it that way a little? So,
pardon?
can you slide it that way a little, the value
here?
study?
There you
Yeah,
go.
there you
So
go.
she-
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
there you go.
Does that help?
Yep.
Yeah, so, you know, the value study can be really helpful to figure out your composition. And the thing about value studies and little thumbnails is they're very fast, and if you do one that you don't like, do another one, you know, and you can probably do it in 5 minutes, and, you know, within 5 or 10 minutes you can come up with a decent composition. I was just gonna see if I could show you any more of these. Let's see, now here's an example of one that didn't work, because I guess I got distracted because I never completed it. But I was gonna do, they have these hula schools in Hawaii, and they're really kind of cute, you know, you can go and watch the kids, they'll put on little performances in the shopping centers, you know, and so, and then one day I asked the hula teacher if I could come and, you know, observe, and so she did let me do that. And I wanted to put some kids in here where she's demonstrating the dance, and I got as far as her, and I didn't finish the job, but that was what I was trying to do there, was to kind of, you know, get my composition. And here's another one. This is a little value study. This is up at Land's End in San Francisco. Show how to do these cliffs and where to put well, your value study is almost the same thing as your composition. It's all part of it, and help you figure it out. And sometimes you can alter just like I did with this picture. You know, I liked the picture, but I wanted to rotate the figure a little bit. So then I gave myself quite a big job trying to figure all of that out. And so that's why I ended up probably spending at least half the time I worked on it, maybe even more, on the drawing. So, does that help?
That helps a lot.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
All right.
All righty.
Okay, now I've made a big mess here, so now I want to fix it, and then I'll send you the finished one.
That's great.